In today's video, we are going to talk about how having any certification is better than having no certification. So you may be a little skeptical, so watch this entire video because I'm going to share some information with you today that you may not be aware of. And so let's get in and talk about it. Now, there's really kind of two reasons why you would have a certification. The first one, right, is so that you can have more knowledge to be able to do your job better. And so a lot of the different certifications that are out there are topical in nature, and a lot of them actually help you to do your job better. Now, the second reason is that certifications help you get recognized and promoted. So if you're looking for a new job or if you're looking to get promoted, certifications will help you. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, whether you realize it or not, your university degree and your experience have nothing to do with you getting a job, right? Those are things that are expected in internal audit. What really separates or differentiates you from other people are the certifications that you have. And so again, why? Why is that the case? Why do these certifications actually distinguish you from other people? Well, some of them are the reasons that we talked about. The first one, right, is it shows potential employers that you have knowledge about certain areas, right, that they're looking for. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The second one, again, is that these certifications show a hiring manager that you're willing to or have invested in your own personal development, right? So you haven't just done the minimum of getting a university degree and having some experience, but you've actually invested in yourself and have continued to learn. Now, it also shows the hiring manager, it helps to separate or differentiate yourself from other people. So let's say, for example, if I'm a hiring manager and I'm hiring somebody to work in internal audit, and their primary responsibility is going to be doing Sarbanes-Oxley work. Okay. So I get 100 applications, 100 resumes that come in for somebody who is going to be a senior auditor doing SOX work in my department. And so out of those 100, resumes that I get in, most of them are going to look the same. Everybody has a university degree. Everybody has probably, we'll say 5 to 7 years of experience because they're looking at a senior auditor position. And maybe even most of them have a certification like cCAE. So, what makes any of those people different from each other? How do I know as a hiring manager who I should interview? Because I can't interview 100 people. And so again, maybe let's say 99 of the people of the 100 people have 5 to 7 years of experience. They obviously have a university degree, and maybe they have a cCAE. We'll say they have cCAE. So, but one of the people on there has the 5 to 7 years of experience. They have the university degree, and they also have something called a certificate in Sarbanes-Oxley. Now just a minute. That's a little bit different, right? And especially if I'm hiring someone for Sarbanes-Oxley work, who do you think is going to be more likely to get an interview? Well, if I'm the hiring manager, I'm going to make sure that that one person out of 100 is in the group of people that I'm going to interview. And that means your likelihood of getting the job just went way up because the first hurdle is to get the interview. Once you get the interview, then it's up to you, right, on being able to show the hiring manager that you know what you're talking about and that you are a good cultural fit for the organization. Okay. So that's what we're talking about here is those are some of the reasons why certifications are so important. So, okay, I say, in the title of this video that any certification is better than no certification. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Okay. Because, what happens in internal audit, there are certain certifications that literally take years to get. And I know some people may not believe me, you may not believe me, but there's plenty of evidence that proves that. So things like a CIA take most people, usually say 2 to 5 years. Now, you might be able to get it in 1 year, but most people it takes at least 2 years because they fail some of the exams, and so they're spending a lot of time taking those exams. So if you're somebody in that situation, right? Do you wait, for years to be able to get a certification like CIA, or is it better for you to have any certification, right, than not having a certification at all? And I would say it is better to have any certification than no certification, right? Because the same thing, again, if you don't have a certification at all, chances are your resume is going to go in the trash can. So, any certification. Wow, that sounds like, anything, Jason, right? And, in a way it is, but the certification should also be relevant. Okay. So if I have a certificate in underwater basket weaving, that's not going to help me get an internal auditor job. But if I have, a certificate or certification in a topic that is at least relevant to internal audit, like risk-based auditing, agile auditing, internal audit reporting, internal audit supervision, anti-money laundering, Sarbanes-Oxley, right? All of those are topics that at least are relevant for internal audit. And so what I find is there's a lot of people who find themselves in this situation because especially with the CIA, you cannot get the CIA unless you have years of experience. But it's hard for people to get a job in internal audit without any certification, right? And so, because of that, a lot of people are waiting. They're waiting years to be able to either get their first job in audit or to get promoted because it's taking them years to get that certification. Well, what if instead you could actually get a certification in 1 to 2 months? Right? 1 to 2 months versus at least a year, if not 2 to 5 years, at least you have something on your resume that will help to distinguish you and help you get your first job, right? Or help you get promoted. Because, like I said, having the certifications, even having just one, is better than none. Having two or three is better than having none, or is better than having one. And so again, and it's up to you on determining exactly what it is that you want to get. But there are lots of certification options out there that don't take years to get. Now, I want to share an analogy with you that goes along with any certification is better than no certification. Okay. And it's something that we see in colleges and universities now. Okay. So, a lot of jobs require a university degree. And so, if when people don't have a university degree, they need to find uh, some place to be able to go to school, right? And so maybe there's something, locally where they can go, or maybe they look for something online. And so, there are a lot of traditional universities that have been around for a long time. I use Harvard as an example only because it was established in 1630. Okay, almost 400 years ago. Almost 400 years ago. And so, it's easy to say, oh, I need to get a university degree. Let me go to Harvard, or let me go to an Ivy League school, or let me go to one that is very prestigious, right? That people know about. And so I can choose to go that route. I could say, I want to get a degree and I want to go to Harvard. And so I put in my application to go to Harvard. In the first year, it's probably denied. So I wait until the next year and I put in my application again, and I may get denied again because I think there's only like 10 to 15% of the people that apply that actually get in there. Okay. So I could go that route and say, nope, that's the one that I want to get. That's where I want to go. My heart is set on that, and I'm willing to wait potentially years to get in and then years to get the degree. That's your choice, right? But what a lot of people are doing now is they're saying, look, there's other options that are out there. And in fact, a traditional, 4-year degree takes 4 to 5 years for people to get at a traditional university. And there's some new options. There's online options, there's hybrid options. And some of those options you can actually earn a bachelor's degree in 2 to 3 years instead of 4 to 5. And so a lot of people, especially who are working, choose to do one of these other options. Okay. Because depending on your situation, you want to look at what is best for you. So a real life example from me, when I moved to Los Angeles, and I was leading up an internal audit group, I decided that I wanted to go back to school and I wanted to get my master's in business administration, my MBA. And so at that point, I had to decide, okay, I want to get an MBA. Where do I want to get it from? How am I going to do it? Right. And so I looked at some of the different online options because, again, I was working 50 or 60 hours a week already. I had a family, kids at home. And so I needed something that would work with my lifestyle, right, with what I needed to do. And so I looked at some of the online options. None of them really resonated that much with me. And I happened to be lucky because I was living in Los Angeles. And in LA, there's actually three different places that score very highly on MBA programs in the US: UCLA, USC, and Chapman University. And Chapman was actually the closest one to me. It was actually in the town that I lived in the LA area, but it was a small university. A lot of people didn't know about it. They didn't really have an advanced track. And UCLA and USC had an option for a night MBA, right? So I didn't have to quit my job. I could go to school at night, and it was an accelerated program, which meant that I could actually get through and get my MBA in 3 years. Now, full time, it usually takes 2 years to get an MBA, but most people that are doing it part time, it takes them 4 or 5 years because they can only take a class at a time. And so, I came down to the decision of, well, do I want to go to UCLA or do I want to go to USC? And at the end of the day, the one that resonated better with me was USC, University of Southern California. Fight on, go Trojans. Um, so that's where I chose to go. Right now, I paid for it. It took me some time. I could have gone to an online school that was maybe a little bit quicker, but that was what was best for me. Right. And ultimately, that's why I do these videos. So you can decide what is best for you. Okay. And so, again, let's go back to the undergrad example. Well, if I want to get a job and I need to have a college degree in order to get the job that I want, I need to decide which degree to get. And so, what's interesting is we've seen a lot of people move away from traditional 4-year on campus university experiences because a lot of people are what are called non traditional students. I was a non traditional student when I got my bachelor's. I had a family, I was working, and so I didn't have kind of that 4-year on campus undergrad experience. I needed something that allowed me the opportunity to work so I could provide for my family, but also, that I could get the degree that I needed. And so for me at the time, because this was a long time ago, right? There was Boise State University was in Boise where I was living at the time. It was a good university. I knew the professors, and so I chose to go there. Now, if I was making that decision today, I may instead choose to go to an online option, right? Because then I don't even have to go onto the campus for my classes. right? But everybody is different on what you want. But again, let's talk about this, right? Because again, there are lots of different options for you to get a university degree. And I'm just going to throw some information out there that you may not know, because some of you may be saying, "Oh, online degree, that's garbage. That's not a real degree." Well, a lot of people disagree with you, and you can see that from the enrollment in some of these universities that I'm going to talk about. And many of them you may have never heard about before, but just because you haven't heard about it doesn't mean it's not a good option. Okay, this is critical thinking. Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not a good option. We can look at things like, well, how many people have enrolled in it, right? And because that will tell us something about it. If it truly is garbage, then hundreds of thousands of people would not go through it, right? And so if we look at universities, right, again, and I'm talking here from the US, there are a lot of different universities that are well known in the United States, but not a lot of people actually go there. And so did you know that actually, and again, this is coming from online, I use Wikipedia, the numbers are a little bit different depending on where you go, but the top 10 colleges or universities by enrollment tend to be about the same. Did you know that Texas A&M University, a traditional university, has the highest enrollment, 77,000 people? University of Central Florida. Well, many of you may not even know that there is a University of Central Florida. Yeah, almost 70,000 people go to the University of Central Florida. And then there's also, University of Florida, Ohio State, Arizona State, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, University of Minnesota, Florida International, University of Texas at Austin, and Michigan State University. So those are the top 10 by enrollment for kind of traditional public universities. Okay. And that, again, it varies from 51,000 up to 77,000 in enrollment. Okay. But what about online? Because here is what to me is very interesting is so many more people are choosing to do things online. Why? Because I don't have to quit my job. I don't have to move somewhere else, right? When I was making the decision on getting my MBA, hey, I would have loved to have gone to Harvard and had a Harvard MBA, but I was not willing to quit my good paying job in Los Angeles, move my family to Boston for 2 years, and take on additional debt because I couldn't work in order to get my MBA. That just didn't work for me, right? And it's that case for a lot of people who are getting their university degrees, which is why online is becoming such a popular option because you can do it from home or wherever you live, right? If you live in the middle of Montana, if you live in the middle of Africa, if you live wherever you happen to be, right? Even where I live right now, the closest university, Arizona State University is 2 hours away from me. So if I were to go there for school, I'd have to drive 2 hours each way, right? Every time I had to go to class. Not an option for a lot of people. But the online universities, you may be saying, well, that's not really a good decision. Well, 98,000 people go to Western Governors University. Now, Western Governors University is probably a university you've never heard of, and yet 100,000 people are getting their degree from there. Southern New Hampshire University, again, you may have never heard of that, 87,000 people. University of Phoenix, 72,000 people. Strayer University, 72,000 people. Grand Canyon University, 40,000 people. And again, these are just numbers for undergrad, right? That some of the other numbers I've seen, because they offer graduate programs too, over 150,000 people are going to some of these universities, right? So online is a good option. Same thing with certification. So let's get back to this. Any certification is better than not having a certification. So again, there are many, many options now in internal audit for people to get certifications, things that you can earn in 1 to 2 months. Some are on C-Risk Academy, but there are others that are also good and relevant for you if you want to get a certification, right? And so I'm not here just to talk about that, but I want you to do what is best for you, right? And so again, as an example, right? This isn't a new thing, just like online universities are not a new thing. How do I know? Because over 20,000 people have gone through some of these certifications uh, that are different than what you may know about. It means it's proven. It means it's helping people, and it may be able to help you as well, right? Now, I talked a little bit before about what I call the chicken and egg syndrome, which is there's a lot of people who want to get a job in internal audit, but most jobs in internal audit require some sort of certification. Now, and many people don't have those certifications to get their first job, and they need experience to get the certification. Well, again, a lot of these new certifications that are out there don't require experience. They don't have certain educational requirements, other things like that. So you can actually, especially for someone trying to get their first job, it's a great opportunity for you to be able to invest, a week or two of your time in getting the training and taking the tests and getting certified within 1 to 2 months. It makes it easier for you at that point. Now, I know some people may be saying again, well, any certification. Well, again, let's talk about this, right? Is it better to have a certification or a certificate of any kind to be able to help you get a job? Yes, right? And like we told you before, especially if it's relevant to what you're going to be doing, it's going to make you stand out. And so it's better, you're going to be more likely to actually have an interview if you have any certification. Now, let's go back and think about this, because some people come to me and say, well, yeah, Jason, I understand that, but certain hiring managers only want to see a certain certification. Well, that's fine, right? That's their decision, but it's really a silly decision. Okay. So as an example, if I were a hiring manager, right, and I'm requiring somebody to have a university degree, and I went to Harvard, okay, and so if I look at other resumes and say, oh, this person, went to Texas A&M, that's not a real university. Only Harvard is a real university. Well, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it? And all of a sudden, the talent pool that you'd be looking at if you're only willing to hire people from Harvard would be very small, even though they have a lot of alumni because they've been around for so long, right? That just wouldn't make sense. And it's just like, people saying, well, I have the cCAE or I'm a CPA, and so I'm only going to hire people who are CIAs or CPAs. Well, that's just as silly as the university example of requiring somebody to have graduated from Harvard. Doesn't make sense, right? They've done the work. My undergraduate degree from Boise State University is just as good as a Harvard undergraduate. How do I know that? Because I've worked with a lot of people who came from Harvard. They weren't any smarter than me. They didn't know any more than me. In fact, a lot of them, because their IQ was so high and they were socially inept and couldn't think outside of the box, a lot of them were actually not very good auditors, right? And so to discriminate or say, well, Boise State's not as good as Harvard, so I'm only going to hire Harvard people, that doesn't make sense. And I know this happens. This happens in real life. One of the chief audit executives I was talking to, she actually said, I like to hire CPAs. And I said, well, that's interesting. Why do you prefer CPAs? And she said, well, because I'm a CPA, and CPAs have usually come from public accounting, which means they know how to work overtime and they understand deadlines and pressure, and I can put more pressure on them and know that they're going to work more than other people do. And I just shook my head. It was the stupidest reason. I can understand because this person wanted to be able to manipulate and exploit their workers. Well, guess what? You know, I would hope that you wouldn't get hired by that person because I don't want you to get exploited. There are plenty of people out there who realize that these other certifications have value as well. And so I'm just going to give you some examples, right? And again, look at what's going to be relevant for you. If you're newer in your profession, you probably want to get something that's a little bit more general. The cIA is very general. The Certified Practitioner in Internal Audit from C-Risk Academy, very similar information to what you learn on the cIA, only you can earn it in 1 to 2 months, right? So maybe that's an option if you're newer. Let's say again, I shared the example about SOX. Well, if you're a SOX auditor, then maybe getting something like a certificate in Sarbanes-Oxley would be a good thing for you. And maybe it's even a good first step for you, right? If you don't have another certification. Because certificate courses like that, same thing, you can earn very quickly, and at least then you have something on your resume. Maybe you're in banking and you work in anti-money laundering. Well, there are certifications around anti-money laundering. CAMS, I think, is one of them, and I'm sure that there's others that are out there that I'm not aware of. But maybe that's a good first step for you in getting some kind of certification, right? And there's, like I said, there's just so many options that are out there, for you to take a look at. Just because everybody's telling you that you need to get one certification or another one is not true, right? And even things like the IIA saying, "Oh, the CIA is the gold standard of internal audit." Well, it's not the gold standard of internal audit. But why do they tell you that? Because it's marketing, because they want to sell you the CIA, right? It's a marketing phrase. And you can choose to believe it if you want to, or not believe it, right? But if you believe everything you're told, you'd be buying everything that comes on the advertisements on TV, right? And so just think about it. Think about what's best for you, right? Another example, if you're looking to be an audit leader, if you want to get hired as a chief auditor, chief internal auditor, chief audit executive, head of internal audit, whatever the title is, right? Most of those people, again, if I'm the hiring manager and I'm trying to hire somebody for that position, out of 100 resumes that come in, I'm going to get people with 15 to 20 years of experience that, yes, have a university degree. Okay. So again, the experience and the degree don't matter. They don't matter in my decision making because everybody has them. So what am I going to look at next? I'm going to look at certifications. I'm going to look at licenses, right? Are they a CPA? Are they a CIA? Do they have something else? Now, again, out of 100 people, probably 80% of those people are going to have CIA and or CPA, 15 to 20 years of experience, university degree. How do I differentiate them? They all look the same, right? They all look the same. Maybe I look for industry experience, but they all look the same unless somebody stands out. So if I have all those resumes and 2 or 3 of them have something called a Certified Chief Audit Executive, I'm going to go, hold it, just a minute. That's a little different. Everybody else has, right, the same things, but these people actually have something called Certified Chief Audit Executive. Now, I'm hiring for a Chief Audit Executive. Maybe I want to interview those 3 people. Right? It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the job. But again, that certification in particular helps you with knowledge in your job, right? Because it actually provides audit leaders with information that usually nobody teaches you. Because honestly, that's the only certification for internal audit leaders that it's out there. But it also helps you to get recognized in the job search. because, like I said, that's something different and it's specifically relevant for that particular job that I'm hiring for. So, if you don't have a certification, I would highly suggest that you consider getting one, and getting, whatever resonates with you, whatever is relevant for you. But realize that there are lots of options that are out there, and you don't have to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years to get certified in internal audit. There's lots of options out there that you can earn in 1 to 2 months. And so my suggestion is it's usually best to start with one of those, because at least you have something if you want to get a job. Now, again, you can choose to do whatever you want to do, but that's why I'm saying, really any certification is better than no certification. So that's the information for today. Thanks for listening, and I will see you on the next video.